Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is John Kelly. I'm the product manager for BMW M. And in the next few minutes, I want to give you a brief introduction to the first ever M2 CS. So you've probably seen a fair amount of information over the last few months about the CS because we did have the start of communication several months ago. But if I'm not mistaken, you haven't had the chance to drive it yet. So I'm super excited to get you behind the wheel next week. Both on the street, so you can see how streetable it is, how comfortable, easy to drive it is, but of course on the racetrack, where you can thoroughly enjoy the outstanding dynamics of the vehicle. I'll also be with you next week, so if you want to discuss this at any length, I'd be happy to go through it with you there as well. Now, what I'd like to do first is, before we get into the actual content of the car, is talk to you a little bit about, putting this in context, where this car fits into the lineup. So for this, we'll look at the levels of M, thank you. If you use 2 Series as an example here, we have at this M Performance layer, this would be like an M240i. Then we have at the M High Performance layer, this would be the M2 when we launched it for model year 2016. And then, of course, we raised the bar for model year 19 when we introduced the M2 Competition. This is when we introduced the S55 engine with more power and a number of other enhancements. Now we've raised the bar yet again with the M2 CS. This represents the top tier for the M2. The car has been thoroughly enhanced, both inside and out, to secure this top position. It's also worth noting that in these 3 different variants that we've had for the M2, that we've maintained a manual transmission, including with the M2 CS, which I'll get to in just a minute. So I'd like to do next is give you a bit of information regarding the substance of this car, which makes it so special, so high performing, so much fun to drive. And this could be beneficial in terms of being a complement to what you'll experience next week when you're actually behind the wheel of the car on the street and on the track. So in terms of product substance, the M2, it uses the M2 Competition as the basis for the car, which is a fantastic car in its own right. However, this is a very different vehicle than the M2 Comp, both visually and dynamically. The CS takes the M2 to the next level. It has more power, lightweight components, more exclusivity, better driving dynamics, brake changes, and so forth. This makes for a great car on the road, but an even better car on the racetrack. We have a number of new, let's say, components or content features that I want to tell you about, some of which are first evers for the M2 and really enhance this product. Starting with the drivetrain. So when you look at the heart of the car, the engine, we have an S55 engine here, which has been optimized for an additional 39 horsepower, so 444 horsepower. This allows the car to get to 60 in under 4 seconds for the first time, 3.8 seconds when equipped with the double clutch gearbox. Speaking of which, bolted to that engine is one of 2 different transmissions. If I'm not mistaken, you'll have both of them next week to be able to experience. We have a standard 6-speed manual, and then we have the optional 7-speed double clutch gearbox. Now, that's the engine, and then on to the chassis. So we have adaptive M suspension on the M2 CS. This is a first for the M2. We haven't had the adaptive suspension prior to this, and what's really great about this, and this is one of the parts of the car that I love so much, because it allows the car to be very well-rounded. So when the suspension is in a comfort setting, it's actually very comfortable, easy to drive. But when you want to drive the car on a track and you put it in sport mode, it firms up the car, firms up the chassis, and it feels like it is properly tuned for the track. Now, when you have the power, you have the chassis, you also need the braking. So we do have a couple of changes here as well. So the standard brakes on the car are our M. It's a compound brake setup. These are M Sport brakes, similar to what we have on the M2 Competition. Here we have red calipers, which we don't offer on the Competition. But also for the first time on the M2, we have carbon ceramic brakes available as an option. So for the customer that wants to take the car to the track on a regular basis, you have this higher performing brake setup available. We also have a change to the tire setup here. So we have standard, it's a high performance tire, non-run flat, similar to what we've seen before, but we have an option for a Cup tire. So this would be a Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tire, very high performing, very dynamic on the track. In terms of wheels, this is different also, and we have one of 2 different wheels. They're actually the same wheel styling with different surface finishes. So you can have this wheel, it's a 19-inch forged wheel, in either high gloss black or the matte gold, which you see here in this image. These are, it's a 19-inch wheel, and they're staggered width, of course, front to rear. We also have an optimized exhaust system for optimized harmonics for the CS, and it has stainless steel tips with the M description in them. Now, in terms of some of the other, let's say, aero components and weight components, we have a few unique differences here as well on the CS. So we have a carbon fiber roof. This is the first time on a series production M2 that we've had the carbon roof, which not only looks great, looks sporty, but it's also functional in that it both reduces weight and reduces the center of gravity, or lowers the center of gravity, I should say. Now, coupled with that, we have a couple of aerodynamic aids with the carbon spoiler and then the carbon front splitter, which both help with improving downforce, as well as a carbon rear diffuser for reduced lift. And now we also have the carbon engine hood, and this is one, I can't wait for you to see it in person because it looks fantastic. It's not only functional in that it's lighter weight than a traditional hood, but it also has different geometry. It looks a little bit different. It looks very aggressive, and it's also vented. Now, moving on to the next slide on the interior, we have a number of changes here as well. We have a carbon center console. We have carbon door handle covers and trim. We have carbon trim on the M2 Competition also. That's an open pore carbon. This is a different one where it has a clear coat over it, so it's a smooth finish. As I mentioned, we have your choice of the standard manual gearbox as well as the double clutch gearbox. We have a grippy M steering wheel in Alcantara, so especially on the track, it feels fantastic, and it definitely helps the wheels stay in your hands there. We have the Misano blue paint. So Misano blue is a color that we've offered previously, but not on the M2. So it's first for the M2, and it can be, of course, recognizable as a CS if it's in this color, and it looks fantastic. We have different seats as well. So the seats are based on the ones we had in the M4 CS. So I'll show you a picture of them in just a minute, but they're very aggressively bolstered, and they have cutouts in the backrest. And it's also covered in merino leather now. We also have badging, both on the instrument panel and on the door sills. Now here you see just a quick front shot of the car to compare the M2 Competition to the CS. And what you see here is from top to bottom, it is uniquely different, uniquely identifiable. Of course, there's the Misano blue paint that I mentioned, but then you have that carbon, from top to bottom, you have that carbon roof, you have that carbon hood with a unique geometry, you have that carbon splitter. And then moving on to the side of the car, again, it's these things that I mentioned that really jump out at you as being a CS. It's unique, it's more dynamic, it's more aggressive. Here you see one that jumps out at you, of course, is the matte gold wheel with the red calipers. And then, of course, the hood and splitter as well. And then on the interior, this is what I mentioned about the seats, where it is a different seat in that it has the cutouts in the backrest. It's also a merino leather as compared to the Dakota leather that we've offered previously. So it's a higher grade material, as well as it has red contrast stitching throughout. And then just to highlight a couple of the key points for the car in summary, the MSRP is starting at $83,600. The horsepower, 444, as I mentioned before, which is 39 higher than what we had on the M2 Competition. 0 to 60 with the DCT, under 4 seconds, 3.8. Top speed, 174 miles an hour. This, actually, I don't think I mentioned this previously, but the car also comes standard with the M Drivers package. This allows for the higher top speed and also a day at the Performance Center. The car is already in production, and it will be reaching customers here in the US pretty soon, expected for next month. So overall, just to finish it up, what I'm super excited about this car is the fact that it's such a well-rounded, enhanced package. It's not only does it look great and have unique content, but it's that well-rounded behavior of power, handling, braking, and of course, still with a manual gearbox.